So now this. President Biden yesterday praising NATO's expansion as it adds Finland and Sweden to the alliance. Listen.
We're more united than ever. And with the addition of Finland and Sweden, we'll be stronger than ever. They have serious militaries, both of them. We're going to increase the NATO border by 800 miles.
Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin, however, expressed his frustration, saying, quote, everything was going fine between us, but now there will be tensions. There certainly will. This is obvious and inevitable. Meanwhile, Russian forces are pulling out of the remote Snake Island off the southern coast of Ukraine. To put it all in perspective, General Jack Keane. General, first off, what is NATO like now with Finland and Sweden that it's not like without them?
Well, considerably stronger, and it's Putin that's done it. He's managed to unite NATO, and certainly Finland and Sweden stepping up. Obviously, seeing what had happened in Ukraine, they recognize the danger that Russia poses to them, and they're bringing to the table here good economies and very good militaries, and they're in the most vulnerable part of the world as far as Russian expansion into a NATO country. That would likely be the Baltic states themselves. Small countries, small militaries, right on the Russian border, very vulnerable. Sweden and Finland add a lot to NATO as a result of this.
Snake Island no longer in the hands of the Russians. How significant?
Well, it's significant certainly because, Ukraine took back territory. It's in a strategic place. But Russia is still going to blockade the cargo ships that are trying to get the agriculture exports out of Ukraine, and that's devastating Ukraine's economy. But this is a step in the right direction. The Russians are lying that they voluntarily left the island. The Ukrainians drove them off there because they were shelling them and killing them.
Turkey is going to have talks with Russia about opening the shipping lanes and allowing grain to get out of Ukraine. Do they have the ability and leverage to actually, and the influence with Vladimir Putin to pull something significant off?
No, I don't think the Turks have that by themselves. This will be Putin's call. Does he feel the humanitarian pressure to release these cargo ships as a result of what's going to happen out in the world? I don't think so. We'll see what happens. I think where Putin is focused on, he wants Ukraine to fail as a state. 35% economic retraction right now, growing likely to 50 because he's shutting down 95% of their exports. I think he'll likely hold on to that position. We hope he changes it for the sake of Ukraine and for the world food supply, but I think it's unlikely he will.
General, I understand that this is an opportunity over the next couple of weeks for the Ukrainians to get on the offensive, just by the way the Russians are configured and might be reinforcing. If so, where would you look for them to make gains?
Yeah, well, first of all, it'll be in the Kherson Oblast. Right there, Russia owns the city of Kherson, but the Ukrainians have been building up and taking territory back from there. And certainly they want to take control of their southern coast that they're beginning to lose to the Russians. This window of opportunity will probably arise in the next several weeks because the Russians will have to pause as a result of the casualties that they've been taking in the Donbass region. That's why these two meetings are so critical that took place in Europe, the G7 and NATO. The commitments in rhetoric are there. Will the commitments be real and in a timely manner with the weapons and ammunition that the Ukrainians need? It's going to be a major test, I believe, of NATO and the international community to be able to help Zelensky get territory back.
Right.
He cannot do it on his own. He's going to need that help.
He's going to need some weapons. Why not give it all at once? This drip-trap flow is not working. General, of course, we know we're a few days away from Independence Day. Very few people have given more of their life to the red, white, and blue than you. What is your message to the country?
Well, first of all, I just think we reflect on how fortunate we are to be here as Americans. Listen, we're the oldest democracy in the world, and yet we're one of the youngest countries. We had a fight for our freedom here. And the genius of the founding fathers, having removed the shackles of repression themselves, they formed a federal government that they didn't want it to be too powerful. They wanted the people to be more powerful. And I think as a result of it, we grew into an exceptional nation, largely for three reasons. We're a meritocracy here. It's up to the individual to succeed in this country, and the conditions are set for that individual to succeed. Very different than other places in the world.
Yeah.
We opened our arms for people around the world to come here, and it changed this country and became an engine in this country in terms of propelling ourselves forward. And we are the most generous country in the world. Look at, we spent the 20th century and a good part of this century going all over the world to remove the shackles of repression that other people were imposing on their own people or others. And we were willing to send our treasure and die for others in countries that most people who were fighting those wars never even heard of and certainly never even visited. It is a remarkable story of American leadership and the contribution we made not only to our own people, but to the world writ large.
Yep, equal opportunity, but not equal outcomes. We just want to compete. General Jack Keane, great message. Appreciate it. Have a great 4th.
Yeah, great talking to you. Yeah, same to you. Happy 4th of July.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.